From Toronto, this is JWeekly Canada, starring Eden Wall and Susan Manouk. And now, from Studio 18, here is Susan Manouk.
Hi, Michael. Welcome.
Susan, thank you for having me.
So, Michael, I want to talk about you and your beginnings. Where did you begin chasing your dreams to be a sportscaster? How did that play into your dream, really?
You know, I think in a lot of ways,
was it a dream?
It was my dream.
Okay.
But I never thought I could actually realize my dream, because I didn't know anyone who did what I wanted to do. So I came from a traditional Jewish home. We went to Beth Tzedek, and my dad was an orthodontist. My brother is a kidney doctor. My uncle, the only one I had, was a chartered accountant. So there was no sports broadcaster in my family. So I had not so much role models, but I had no one to look at and say, well, if he could do it, I could do it. And that delayed, I think, me going for it. But my biggest advantage was the fact that I had no other options. I found out when I was in second year at the University of Toronto, I was failing out. And you're thinking to yourself, I probably wasn't failing out. No, I was failing out. Mm-hmm. And I realized, I don't have anything. Medical schools aren't calling me. Law schools aren't calling me. So I may as well take a run at the one thing that I want. So I made this commitment in my head. I walked into campus radio at the University of Toronto. I pushed the button, red light went on, I started talking, and it was like, okay, there's a place in the world for me, because there had never been anything that had interested me before.
And was it sports? Was it specifically sports that
Specifically
interested you?
Sports. And I think as time went on, I enjoyed broadcasting, like the art of broadcasting, the challenge of broadcasting, talking on camera, the performance aspect of it, more than I did actually the subject matter. So I would have been happy talking about just about anything. Sitting here today, I'm just as happy talking about anything in my life and not talking about sports at all.
Okay.
JWeekly Canada will be right back. Welcome back to JWeekly Canada.
So I want to move on to hashtag Sick Not Weak, which is your creation. Let's talk about, I love that, because, referring to mental illness, right, how they're, you're validating. They're sick, just like a physical sickness. They're not weak. So you tell me why you created this, and it's really exploded. It's given people a platform to express themselves.
One of the first speeches I ever gave was at Mount Sinai Hospital it was like Young Achievers Group. I don't remember what it was called. And I'm up there, and I'm a little bit surprised that people aren't challenging me on the idea that a mental illness like depression is no different than a physical illness like cancer or heart disease or lupus or anything like that, because that's at the heart of the stigma. If you believe that depression is just as devastating, just as based on a physical change in your brain, then there's no stigma there. It's when you think that it's different, when you see it as, you know what, I understand, but. So I thought someone would challenge me on it. No one did. So I said, please, someone, I know you believe this, people in the audience. More than half of Canada still sees mental illness as a weakness. I said, someone, challenge me. And the guy put up his head and said, okay, I will. And we went back and forth. And I said at the end, I'm sick, but I'm not weak. And I don't know how I mentioned it again, but I did, and it kind of just stuck. And we started a charity in 2018 with the mandate to show the world, Canadians, that a mental illness like depression or anxiety is a sickness, not a weakness. And if you can do that, especially, more for men than for women. Men are so afraid of being perceived as weak. And if you see your struggles with your mental health as being a weakness, you're never going to tell anyone. And if you don't tell anyone, your relationships will crumble. If you don't tell anyone, you will never get better. And if you don't tell anyone, you will waste that period of life. I always say that suicide is the greatest tragedy when it comes to mental health, mental illness, obviously. But it's also tragic if you live with a mental illness without searching out the help, because you have given up that time in your life that you will never get back.
I was sneaky looking at your tattoo. What is this all about? What does it mean?
11/24/08 YUL MH5210400. 11/24/08, November 24th, 2008. YUL is the Montreal Airport code. MH521 is the Marriott Hotel Room 521. 0400 is 4 a.m. in the morning. I have battled anxiety all my life, and I have battled depression at that point for 10 years. And I memorialized this on my arm because this was the worst moment or moments in my life. I sat on the edge of my bed after just a terrible year and a half. And I thought to myself, that's why people take their own lives. Because the pain that I was in, which by the way is almost impossible to describe to someone who's never been through it. We associate pain, physical pain with, ow, my arm is hurting me. How do I describe depression's pain? But I can describe the depth that I was more afraid to have to go through the next day. Doing the show, seeing people, being with people. I was way more afraid to have to do that than I was of dying. And I think it's really important to talk about that because, like people don't talk about suicide. People don't talk about, they try not to talk about depression. And, I'm here to say that, yeah, I understand how painful it can be. I understand how bad it can be. I understand the idea of losing self-esteem, which we all do. I understand the idea of losing the ability to experience joy, which we all do. I understand the hopelessness, the loneliness. But the thing is, you can tell from how I'm saying it. I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed. And one more, I'm not weak.
You're definitely not weak. And I really like that idea because it's a conversation starter.
It is. And that's exactly the perfect point. That's how I try to do it. So when I walk my dog during the summer and I'm wearing short sleeves, I'm just walking like this. Oh, you noticed that, did you?
No, but it is very important. But, for families out there who have a loved one who have, someone struggling with mental illness on some level, how can they help besides, validating how they're feeling? We don't know. Like you said, we can't know how you are experiencing this. So what can we possibly do to help them so they don't go into despair and, God forbid, take their life?
Susan, that's a question that is really difficult to answer because instinctively, we have no idea how to help someone with a mental illness. Physically, with an illness, we do, right? If someone had knee surgery, how can I help them? Oh, wait a second here, I can help them over to the couch or whatever.
Absolutely.
But with mental illness, we have no clue. And it starts with this one thing. Say these words, if you haven't been through it. I don't understand. But I thought I did. Because kind of we all have, I call it the arrogance of the healthy brain, is we think, okay, well, I've been through bad times. I've had times in my life when I didn't get out of bed. I've had times in my life when I was sad, when I was anxious, but I didn't have to say, well, look at me, I have an illness. I have to go on medication. I'm strong and he's weak. That's how the healthy brain thinks about it. And that's how I thought about it before I was diagnosed. I thought, what is that, depression? Suck it up kind of thing. My dad died a year and a half ago. That makes me sad, but it doesn't make me depressed. I went for an MRI a couple of months ago and waiting for the results. I was anxious, but that's not general anxiety disorder. Anxiety, angst, sadness, natural part of life, inevitability. But what's not inevitable and what we all don't go through are these illnesses, depression and anxiety. And if you can make it clear that you don't understand, I think that's a huge leap forward towards doing your best to help.
Well, Michael, it was really nice getting to know you, and I'm so thankful that you're here and sharing your story and that you're doing well.
Thank you for that. Thank you for giving me the chance to tell my story.
You're watching Canadian Jewish Television. My name is Susan Manouk.
JWeekly Canada will be right back. Welcome back to JWeekly Canada. Here is Eden Wall.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to see you.
Great to see you too.
Liz Beiderman.
Yes.
Wow, we have you in the studio. I've been wanting to sit down with you for some time. Your reputation is amazing, and you're a psychotherapist, but I always think about psychotherapists as this kind of wide category of therapists, right? And some, we have to admit, might not have the world's greatest qualifications and acumen and skill set, and then some are in many ways more perspicacious than an actual psychiatrist or psychologist. It just depends, I think, on the experience and on everything that the therapist brings to the table. And in your case, your skill set certainly precedes you. We're happy to have you here. Let's talk about mental health.
Sure.
There is a global mental health crisis going on, certainly in Canada. What is at the root of this mental health crisis?
Right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
For sure.
And I think that's a really interesting and really, I guess, complex question too, because to your observation, I think it's wonderful that we have more funding now than we have in the past. It almost feels like more than at any other point in recent memory.
Much needed.
So I guess what that tells me is that I think that there's been more acknowledgement that we're in a global mental health crisis now than there has been at any other point previously. I think that there's been several things that could potentially be at the root of the crisis. The stigma against mental health that has been getting better but still exists, I think has prevented a lot of people from seeking help who otherwise would have. I think it's stifled a lot of potential conversations that we could be having about mental health. And I think that if we had felt as if we could talk about this for longer, then we potentially could have started to see this kind of funding and support for mental health services earlier. That would be speculation on my part at this point, but I do think that that's a part of it. And I also think that we live during a time in history when we potentially put more pressure on ourselves than I can seem to recall.
Well, I think of social media.
Absolutely.
And it's this, oh man, so many words are coming to mind. It's like this omnivorous, pernicious, insidious, just to use a few words, monster, this beast, right? And it's ravaging society, specifically our youth. And I'm sure you see clients that are very much entangled and enmeshed into this constant wheel of keeping up with everybody else who are living fake lives, but they think it's real. Nobody measures up, but everybody's trying to measure up. It's, you know, you have so much falsities and propaganda, and it's just crazy. How do you think social media is affecting the clients that you see?
I think that it's affecting them in a lot of different ways. I work with a very broad age range of clients, but a lot, I guess my clients do tend to trend more towards millennials, maybe older Gen Z, basically people who are anywhere from their early 20s into maybe their mid 40s or so. And these are generations that have either grown up entirely on social media or at the very least began using it during formative years of their lives. I know for myself, it was when I was in university that something like Facebook came into my own awareness, and the comparisons began almost immediately. Like, we weren't even living in an age where we were counting things like likes and reposts at the time as a measure of our self-worth or our popularity. And I caught myself doing it and pretty much thought I was the only one until I started talking to other people and realizing that they were also starting to feel worse about themselves the more they used social media. And this was before it was being monetized in the way it is now, before there were ads being run or placements being put out, basically instructing you on how to be better and how to be more accepted by others.
As much as we talk about it, I don't think we've still adequately delved into how complex and pernicious this topic is, especially for our youth, right? Especially for the
Yes.
young minds who just don't have the wisdom and don't have the fortitude, the perspective to understand how manipulative this monster really is. But I do think it's ravaging society. Would you agree?
I mean, it's definitely been creating, I think, or at the very least contributing to a lot of distress in different ways. And I don't think that...
What do you mean by distress?
By distress, I mean it can sort of create these expectations for a lot of people using it that may lead them to believe that this is the most important thing they can strive for, whether it's being social media famous, whether it's somehow living up to some sort of image that they see on social media, whether they're browsing and looking at the personas that other people have cultivated for themselves on social media. And
Cultivated.
Well, yeah, think about it. I mean, listen, if you had gone on my own social media during my 20s, you would have assumed that all I did was travel and go on vacations because those were my nicest photos. So that was just all I ever posted. And, you know, people might think, wow, that's...
I mean, you conveniently left out the photos of your abject depression? If you were genetically engineering the perfect quintessential psychotherapist, what would that person look like to you?
Okay, so this is almost...
Because we're in a world of genetic engineering now, and this is probably going to be happening in the next 6 months or the next 6 days. But I'm asking you, what would that person look like? Let's talk about their qualities, their attributes.
Okay, so I'm making like a therapist sim. Or
Portrait.
like their... Okay.
Portrait.
Wow. No, you're right.
What's the most important thing they should have?
Self-awareness.
I like that.
I think that that's really important. And
Why?
Because I think that you're a person first.
Yeah.
When you're becoming a therapist. I think, and this is something, I think a lot of therapists can maybe relate to this, when you're going through your training, you focus so much on the specific skills and making sure that you've learned all of the strategies and that you never make a mistake and every session is going to be absolutely perfect, that you really do forget the real reason that people often seek out therapy. It has to do with the connection and the relationship that they can form with their therapist. And that's going to be the relationship with you, not somebody else. So having self-awareness, not just of who you are, but what are your own hang-ups, fears, insecurities, biases, and making sure that you're willing to not just acknowledge them, but also to take care of yourself as a therapist, to understand that it's how are you supposed to preach in a session with somebody else who's vulnerable, how important it is to be good to yourself and kind to yourself if you're not willing to extend that to yourself.
Doing that to yourself. I love it. Self-awareness. What's next, do you think?
I think also openness and really good listening skills, because a lot of the time what differs between a conversation with your therapist versus a conversation with a friend or family member has to do with what we will refer to as active listening. So when we're talking to friends or family, a lot of the time we can't help ourselves. We start forming opinions and we try not to, but we start giving advice and suggestions.
Judgments.
That can be the case too. And as a therapist, you have to come at it from a non-judgmental stance, from a place of acceptance, which means that you have to do your best to listen and to try to understand, to try to put yourself for a moment in the mindset or within the worldview of this person that you're speaking with. Because even if you've been through something quite similar to what they are describing in that moment, it still doesn't mean that you understand how they're feeling about it or how it impacted them personally. So that's where it's invaluable to listen.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Take care. You're watching Canadian Jewish TV. We'll be right back. Thanks for watching.
JWeekly Canada will be right back. Welcome back to JWeekly Canada. And now, here is Eden Wall.
So you're at a moment in your life when you're seriously considering ending it all. Your inner man saying, pack it in, but the world saying, be brave and stand tall. It's a constant siege of torment, 24/7, winter, spring, summer, and fall. You're tired of the game, you're tired of the pain. It's tough to keep hitting the wall. And so you got the phone in your hand, and you're ready to make the final call. First things first, there is a God. He ain't Jewish or Christian or Muslim or Hindu. He wears every color of the human soul, and he wears every man's shoes. It might seem like he's a million miles away, but he's right inside of you. Truth is, he's always been there. Through your wear and tear, through your anguish and despair, through your broken heart and your private affairs, he's always been right there. I was in your very position, not once, not twice, many times, so listen closely, here's my supposition. When I was at my lowest point, I cried out to God, this pain is too much for me, so I'm handing my burden to you, Lord, and with it the key to set me free. I'm done trying to do it alone, trying to heal my own broken bones, hovering over my own fate like a bald eagle or a fluttering drone. It's your race to win. It's your victory to begin. My cup is empty, Lord. Now fill it to the brim. Let my recovery be for your glory. Let my rebirth be your story. I ran away from you because I was angry, but I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. My friends, after I said those words, something happened that I can't quite explain. After I cried out to God with all my heart, I felt like Moses as he put his staff into the sea. I felt like Joseph when he was finally set free. I felt like Adam when he first saw Eve. I felt like David as he slew the mighty Goliath. I felt like Isaac as he was saved on Mount Moriah. You see, my friends, sometimes surrendering is the greatest sign of strength and might. Maybe you weren't taught this in school, but trust me, it's right. Sometimes kneeling down on your knees is the only way to fight. Sometimes it takes a contrite heart to make it right. Sometimes we have to see blind to get back our sight. Sometimes it takes an act of humility to scale the darkness and to reach the light. There is a God, and he cares. He'll never give you more than you can bear. Crisis is his way of bringing you back to him. Whether you know it or not, he's your father and your next of kin. Everywhere you were, are, and will be, he's already been. So before you decide to pull down your own curtain, there's one thing of which you must be certain. You are not alone in this fight, even though you're hurting. God is right there with you, and so you can never be alone. Do you hear what I'm saying? There is a way out. All you have to do is let go of the pain, let go of the blame, let go of the shame, call out his name, and trust me, you're right back in the game. And so I say to you with all my heart and all my soul, there is one person who can make you whole. So call out his name like a child calls for his father, and you watch, your empty cup will be filled with water. So in your decision to stay or go away, I pray to God with all my heart, you'll decide to stay.